Hey guys, this is SamAttack4427 here with a very special video for all of you guys. Well, it's July.
Well, technically, I actually recorded this video in July, hoping I'll have it done around the same month, but unfortunately, it is now August, which means I'm about a month late during the time this video is posted, so I do indeed apologize in advance for this. So, anyways, enjoy the rest of the video.
And you know what that means? Well, true, but we're already past that. No, this video is going to be something rather special when you think about it. You see, if you can't tell by the obvious title of the video, you see it? You see it right there? Do you read it? You read it? You read it? Got it? Okay, good. This here marks the official 20th anniversary of a certain movie that you may or may not have heard of, which goes by the name Thomas and the Magic Railroad.
Yes, folks, it's been well over 2 decades since this little blue tank engine we all knew made its way into its very first cinematic adventure on the big screen. Even to this day, ever since its official release and regardless on its reception, the mass majority of people seem to be split down the middle on this movie. Some people praise the movie, calling it a truly amazing film, while others call it out for being a tasteless and depressing guilt trip that made us waste 90 minutes of our time.
I don't know about that last part, but I do see why in most areas. But truth be told, I am one of those people who seem to have mixed reactions to the film. But regardless on its reputation right about now, it did leave a massive impact for sure.
People on the internet may still have mixed opinions on the movie now, but it did spark numerous of videos on the internet, ranging from remake videos, reviews and discussions, and even redubs on the movie entirely. So, seeing on how it has been well over 20 years since the movie came out, I thought to myself, what can I do for this occasion?
Well, after giving it much thought, I thought I would do something that anybody would do with these kinds of videos. Research on the entire history of the movie. Yes, folks, to help celebrate the movie's 20th anniversary, I figured that I would share with you all today the entire history on how this movie got made and how this film adaptation about our friendly little tank engine went horribly wrong, but somehow right in some areas.
Now, going into this, my main inspiration to make this video is after watching all the history videos / editorials by one of my favorite internet reviewers, Ahcroft. I think his videos are great, and I figure I would do the same thing for the movie we're going to be talking about, and that's exactly what we're about to find out. Not only that, but I also took inspiration from part of the Steaming to Legacy video series done by both Enterprising Engines 93 and Smurfy Dan on the same topic that I'm going to be talking about for today.
Now, what you're about to experience is, well, like in the movie itself. A whole mystery that is about to be solved on how a Thomas the Tank Engine movie that would have been amazing turned into a massive disaster during its time, but did manage to find new life all thanks to the entire Thomas and Friends community. So, what is it about Thomas and the Magic Railroad and how it came to be for well over 20 years and still going? Well, brush off that old conductor's hat and get ready to sparkle, 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 because we're about to find out. But first, a little recap on the entire Thomas and Friends franchise beforehand.
It all began in 1942 when a man named the Reverend Wilbur Awdry began telling stories to his son Christopher, who was 2.5 years old at the time, when he was sick in bed with measles. One of the stories that Wilbur told to his son, which appealed to him so much, is about a sad-looking engine that has the same feeling as Chris. To which when he asked his father what his name is, Wilbur responded by saying his name is Edward. Christopher loves these stories so much that he asked his father for more stories like this.
And wouldn't you know it, that's exactly what Wilbur did!
Over the next 2 to 3 years, he continued sharing stories to his son about Edward and... Over the next 2 to 3 years, he continued sharing stories to his son about Edward and the other engines added in later on, such as Henry and Gordon. In fact, he incorporated drawings to show to his son, showcasing what they look like. All of which based on engines and the railways around the UK.
Which is quite interesting when you think about it, because all throughout his entire life, Wilbur is not only a train enthusiast ever since he was a little kid, but he also lived in a town next to a Great Western line from Paddington to Bristol. Seriously, with something like that, who can deny that?
Because of how well his stories are doing for his son, his wife, Margaret Audrey, encouraged her husband to get these stories published into a whole series of books. To which he did exactly that in 1945. His stories were officially published into a book series that officially gave the name the Railway Series, which started off with the first book, The Three Railway Engines, which featured the three engines that I mentioned, Edward, Gordon, and Henry, and was released on May 12, 1945. But it wouldn't be until a year later, on October 18th, 1946, when the second book came around, which featured the little blue tank engine we all know, Thomas the Tank Engine. The first two books became massive commercial successes when they were first published, with the first book ending up selling over 22,500 copies by the end of the year. So much so that more books came out years later afterwards. However, after only 26 books, Wilbur Awdry officially retired from the book series altogether in 1972, and his son Christopher officially stepped in and brought it back on September the 12th, 1983, with the release of the 27th book in the series, Really Useful Engines, all the way until 2011.
Now, with the success of the entire Railway Series books, there were multiple attempts at bringing an official adaptation of the book series.
And I mean that too. There were a couple of attempts at putting together an adaptation of the Railway Series books, including a live pilot episode that was broadcast on the BBC in 1953, which was infamous for particularly having a model of Henry derail and have a human hand show up to put him back on the rails, to which didn't go so well. Even well-known composer himself, Andrew Lloyd Webber, best known for his musicals that he has done like Phantom of the Opera and Cats, wanted to put together his own adaptation of the Railway Series books in 1976, but it sadly got cancelled. Which led to him to try again 8 years later, except this time, he took inspiration from the books, leading to him creating one of his most successful musicals during that time in both London's West End and on Broadway, Starlight Express. Other than that, hardly any attempts at a proper adaptation of the Railway Series books ever saw the light of day. But it wasn't until the late 1970s to the early 1980s when a woman named Britt Ahcroft came in and wanted to give a shot at adapting them into a TV show, to which Wilbur agreed.
And you know what? They actually did it right this time!
Yes, you heard it right. Britt Ahcroft officially put together an official TV show based on the Railway Series books, which gave it a new name as Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends, later known as Thomas and Friends, with her as producer, and directed by the late David Mitton, as well as first narrated by former Beatles member Ringo Starr. The show made its debut on October the 9th, 1984 on the ITV network in the United Kingdom, and when it came out, it became a massive hit. So much so that it not only made a massive impact for everyone in the United Kingdom, but also everywhere else throughout the globe. But it wouldn't be until 5 years later in 1989 when Ahcroft alongside Rick Sigelkow brought Thomas overseas to the United States, all thanks to the spin-off show entitled Shining Time Station. Since then, and even after Wilbur Awdry's passing in 1997, the two shows, let alone the entire Thomas the Tank Engine franchise, became such big hits. With numerous amount of television seasons, many different narrators over time like Michael Angelis in the UK, alongside plenty of narrators in the US, such as Alec Baldwin and the late George Carlin, just to name a few. VHS and DVDs, CD-ROMs and video games, numerous of Day Out with Thomas events, and a ton of toy companies and even model railway companies, again, just to name a few.
So yeah, with the entire Thomas franchise, more specifically the TV show becoming a huge hit, you could just imagine that they would actually push it one step forward and actually put together an entire movie adaptation based on the Little Blue Train in order to keep its popularity going. Well, believe it or not, that's exactly what Britt Allcroft had in mind.
During the early 1990s, at the height of the show's popularity, with 3 successful seasons alongside Shining Time Station becoming successful in the US, Britt Allcroft started making plans to turn the Little Blue Train into a feature film made for the big screen. Around the same time, the 4th season was launched in 1994, with one major idea which became the main factor to the whole idea in the first place, was to combine both shows together, making use of the live-action segments in Shining Time and the models that were used in the show. There were other ideas that are completely different, some of which are completely separate, with Shining Time Station in development on its own movie, but the latter never got off the ground following the show coming to an end on June 11th, 1993. Then, in February of 1996, Ahcroft was then approached by Barry London, who was then vice chairman of Paramount Pictures at the time, with the idea of a Thomas the Tank Engine movie she's working on. To which at that time, London stated that her 3-year-old daughter loved Thomas so much and would love to bring him to the big screen. So with the idea presented, Barry agreed to the idea, and Britt Allcroft signed the contract to it and began writing the script. The film was originally going to be entitled Thomas and the Rainbow Railway, but over time, leading up to the film's release, it was then changed into the current title we got now, known as Thomas and the Magic Railroad. Not only that, but with Ahcroft writing the script, it was also revealed that filming for the movie was gonna take place at Shepperton Studios, as well as parts of the UK and the US, with the film set to be released in 1997.
So right now, Ahcroft is all set and getting everything ready to make her dream a reality. That is, until it all sank.
In 1997, Barry London left Paramount, which led to the studio pulling the plug on the project, and plans for it were immediately shelved.
So yeah, with that big loss, you'd think that Ahcroft would just give up and move on to other projects. Well, not exactly. Why? Because she never gave up hope.
Because of Paramount shelving the project, Ahcroft still never gave up hope for the movie, and she decided to seek out other sources and even other studios to pick up the project as well as funding for it. But the most it got up to by far was that discussions for the movie were held with Polygram, but it didn't go any further than that because the company was in the middle of a corporate restructuring and sale. However, during the summer of 1998, while Season 5 of the show was launched, Ahcroft saw an advertisement from the Island of Man Commission offering up tax incentive to filmmakers and studios who would love to take up on several film projects on their island. She then visited the Island of Man a few weeks later, and based on what she saw, she knew that it would be perfect for the movie.
So by the sounds of it, it looks like Britt Allcroft has gotten everything she needs in order to get her movie off the ground, until a certain individual that I mentioned earlier came into the scene once again. And can you guess who that individual is? Yep, none other than Barry London himself. It's quite interesting that I actually mentioned him earlier.
Yes, in 1999, just a year after she decided to film the movie at the Isle of Man, Ahcroft met up with London again and renewed his interest on the movie, which led to him becoming the main financial backer on the project under the new studio that he founded, as well as becoming chairman of the newly found Destination Films, which also serves as the main studio behind the project.
To which at that time, the studio that I mentioned only had a few releases such as Bats, Eye of the Beholder, and Drowning Mona, all of which when they came out were either critically panned, completely bombed at the box office, or both for that matter. But regardless on that, London and Ahcroft were convinced that this movie would actually become a massive hit.
With the film now having an official studio finally backing it up, and with a complete script locked in place by Ahcroft, casting on the movie began. And this movie got a select number of big names so far for the film, such as Peter Fonda as Burnett Stone, and not to mention Alec Baldwin, who also served as the show's narrator in the US for seasons 5 and 6, signed on board to play Mr. Conductor after George Carlin left the role. Plus, Dee Kong, who played Stacey Jones in Shining Time Station, came in to reprise her role for the movie, while Russell Means took over for Tom Jackson to play Billy Two Feathers. Also, a few other characters as well as a couple actors signed on as well, such as Michael E. Rogers playing Mr. Conductor's cousin named Junior, and the biggest one by far was former child star actress Mara Wilson, who was well known for her performance in Matilda, came in to play Lily, to which it also served as her final role in a movie before her retirement from acting.
Well, for the time being.
Not only that, but it was also revealed that Doug Lennox would be on board for the movie playing the film's antagonist, P.T. Boomer.
So, of course, with the main actors on board for the film, what about all the trains that reside on the island of Sodor? Well, they actually got some really good names.
For starters, Michael Angelis, who was the show's narrator in the UK, signed on board for the movie to play James and Percy. Australian voice actor Keith Scott signed on board to play another main antagonist for the film named Diesel 10, with Patrick Breen, who played the narrator in Magic Adventures of Mumphy, another project that Britt Allcroft was a part of, playing Diesel 10's sidekicks and/or minions named Splatter and Dodge. But the biggest one out of all of them was Isle of Man resident and part-time taxi driver John Bellis, officially signed onto the project to play Thomas. Beforehand, big-name actors such as Ewan McGregor and Bob Hoskins expressed interest for the role of Thomas, but were both dropped in favor of Bellis. And that's alongside other actors that joined, such as Kevin Frank, Neil Crome, Colm Force, Shelley Elizabeth Skinner, again, just to name a few.
Oh, and speaking about what I said about Diesel 10, Splatter, and Dodge, there is one other character that also got introduced for this movie.
And that engine I'm talking about is none other than a magical engine whose name is Lady. Speaking of which, she was gonna communicate through telepathy with Thomas, as well as Morse coding with her whistle, but was instead changed into giving her a speaking role, with Britt Allcroft providing the voice, as you can see here.
So, Burnett, you didn't forget about magic. It's safe inside you.
Okay, I might be getting one step too ahead on this one, but trust me, it'll come into play later. But still, with all the key casting now officially complete, it is now time to get the movie into production.
Principal photography on the movie began on August 2nd, 1999, with the movie set to be released during the summer of 2000. With key filming locations including the Isle of Man, as I mentioned earlier, with one location, the Castletown Railway Station, made to look like Shining Time Station, as well as a goods shed at Port St. Mary Railway Station, made to look like Burnett Stone's workshop. As I stated before, the film was supposed to be shot at Shepperton Studios, particularly for the model sequences, but it was instead moved to Toronto, Canada, with several people including David Mitton, David Eves, Steve Asquith, and Terry Permane working alongside Allcroft for the model sequences, as well as numerous effect shots. As I should mention this right now, this would be the first time that actual human actors would interact with the engines, which was done using green screen work and chroma key effects to accomplish that technique, as you can see here.
The journey from Shining Time keeps getting bumpier and bumpier.
Does it? A big bully Diesel is back, Mr. Conductor. You had better be careful.
Sir Topham had warned me about Diesel. Don't worry, Thomas. I'll just pop in and out with my sparkle wherever he goes and keep him in order. I hope.
You see? With something like that, how could you not see past that?
Not only that, but it was also shot at the Harrisburg Transportation Center in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, as well as the Strasburg Railroad in Strasburg, Pennsylvania. In fact, speaking about the latter, one of the engines that are currently operating on that railway, engine number 475, was repainted for the movie, made to look like Shining Time Station's train that Billy Two Feathers run, known as the Rainbow Sun. Not only that, but while filming on the railway, the owners of the Strasburg Railroad struck a deal with Ahcroft to turn one of their engines, which is Brooklyn East District Terminal number 15, into a full-size, actual running version of Thomas for their Day Out with Thomas events, to which she happily agreed, and you can actually still see their version of Thomas today. And finally, for the Magic Railroad sequences, they were done using not just models, green screen, and chroma key, but was also done by using both CGI and watercolored matte paints. So with all that said and done, production on the movie officially wrapped on October 15th, 1999, with the film's official website being launched months later by the Brit Ahcroft Company.
So by the sounds of it, with a very smooth production and everyone being proud of what they accomplished, it looks like this movie seemed to be right on track, no pun intended, to actually become a massive hit and could actually meet the height of Thomas's popularity. But then came March of 2000, where everything starts to go completely off the rails. Again, no pun intended.
Around that time, a test screening of the movie was held in a shopping mall in Los Angeles, California, and the reactions the audience gave to the film...
Oh boy. Let's just say it didn't go the way the people who made this movie thought they would.
The film's test screening was so bad that it caused executives over at Destination Films to force Brit Ahcroft to make drastic changes to the entire film. For starters, Bellis as Thomas and Angelus as James and Percy were dropped because the test audience felt they were too old and too British to play these characters.
You heard right, the test audience thinks they're too British for their characters. Isn't that kind of like saying that you want to change up Les Miserables because the executives thought they were too French, or even changing up Mulan because it's too Chinese? I'm so sorry about that last part that I mentioned, but you actually get what I mean by that argument.
But regardless, casting changes were made to those two that I mentioned earlier, so instead of John Bellis as Thomas, he's replaced by Edward Glenn, and instead of Michael Angelis as James and Percy, he's replaced by Susan Roman to play James, and Linda Ballantyne as Percy. Speaking of which, those two voice actresses that I mentioned also provided voices for the Dink and Cloverway dub of Sailor Moon at that time. Not only that, but Patrick Breen was also replaced by both Kevin Frank and Neil Crone as Splatter and Dodge. Instead of having Keith Scott as Diesel 10, he's replaced by Neil Crone, to which for the latter, he originally provided a Russian accent, but the test audience find it offensive and instead went for a New Jersey accent. In fact, while re-recording his lines, he improvised his lines for a bit and gave the nickname of Diesel 10's claw, which was Pinchy, which ultimately ended up in the final film. But the biggest insult out of all of the changes for the movie by far was that Doug Lennox as P.T. Boomer was cut out of the movie entirely because the test audience find him to be too scary. The only way you can see him was in a couple of moments in both the Japanese trailer with all the stuff before it got cut out, part of the film's theatrical trailer, a small appearance in the final cut as a motorcycle rider, and if you look closely during the chase scene, you can actually see him on top of Diesel 10. Other than that, that's it. He's not shown anywhere else in the film, making Diesel 10 the main villain of the movie.
So yeah, with all those cuts made, it looks like the movie is in deep trouble and wasn't what Ahcroft would have hoped for, but because of that, they still pressed on with the movie.
Around late June of 2000, Ahcroft and editor Ron Wiseman managed to finish editing the film's final cut just in time for its theatrical release, with the film first holding its premiere at the Odeon Cinemas in Leicester Square on July 9th, 2000, with the film officially released in theaters on July 14th, 2000 in the United Kingdom under Icon Film Distribution, and released in the United States on July 26th, 2000. Speaking of the first part that I mentioned, to celebrate this occasion, they brought in authentic steam locomotive number 47298, repainted to resemble Thomas. For while the premiere went well in attendance numbers with over 2,000 children attending, press coverage on the movie was incredibly low. Part of the reason for that is because around the same time the film had its premiere, the vast majority of journalists were focused more on the release of the fourth Harry Potter book at the time, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, which also had a steam engine that was repainted at the time made to resemble the Hogwarts Express. So, yeah, when journalists had to decide either on a movie about a little blue tank engine or the latest installment of a book series with a bunch of tweens wielding wands, they mainly chose the latter. But in spite of that, when the film came out in the UK at over 300 cinemas nationwide, it was well received and described as cool by British film critics.
So with something like that, sounds like they actually really like this movie. Not great, but still a fun flick to enjoy. Well, it does sound that way, yes, but they had numerous problems with the film.
For starters, the use of the term railroad instead of railway seemed to be unsettling to British audiences. On top of that, they were unfamiliar with Shining Time Station, which of course led to the film getting criticized as being Americanized. But Britt Ahcroft was quick to deny that, claiming that it was only put there to appeal to wide general audiences.
Well, if you think the film's release in the UK was bad enough, oh boy, how do I describe it, yes, the film's reception when it came out in the US is actually far worse than you could imagine.
When the film was officially released in the United States nearly 2 weeks after its release in the UK, the reception on the film was actually much worse than how it performed in Britain. Critical reception on the film were, of course, mixed to negative at best. For while there are some critics who showed a bit of appreciation for the film, like Mel Minow of Common Sense Media giving the film 3 stars out of 5, saying that it will please the fans, but the plot might confuse kids. Some mainstream critics, like the late Roger Ebert and Richard Roeper, who were film critics for the Chicago Sun-Times and hosts of the TV show At the Movies, with the latter replacing the late Gene Siskel after his passing in 1999, slammed the film for lacking its redeeming qualities. Not to mention, even criticized both Alec Baldwin and Peter Fonda's performances, as well as the entire model sequences in the movie.
You don't see it so much there, but Peter Fonda goes through most of this movie in what looks like a very deep depression, maybe clinical. He's depressed because he has trouble bringing Lady the Locomotive back to life. I just can't make her steam, he says. Maybe he's also depressed because Thomas and the Magic Railroad seems so unsure of itself. Both Fonda and Baldwin seem stranded here in a world that never really becomes charming or magical or certainly even convincing.
Well, you know, Peter Fonda and Alec Baldwin, I'm watching these guys and thinking, what, James Woods wasn't available? I mean, the casting on this is unbelievable. And yeah, Peter Fonda seems to be in some other movie, and Alec Baldwin's trying to, I'm going to do a kid's movie now. And you mentioned about the trains and how they don't talk. Now, trains are already stuck on tracks, right? So now they're stuck immobile, sort of on tracks. They can only go this way. And remember, and that's about the level of the animation on here. And with all the fun things you can do these days with modern special effects, to have these little choo-choo trains going.
Now the lips don't move.
It's a nightmare.
The lips don't move on PBS, but maybe that's because they have a low budget. But the lips should move. I mean, either that or the eyes shouldn't move. You know, take your choice.
Well, read my lips. This is a bad movie.
Enough, Fonda's performance is not bad. It's in the wrong movie. It should be in something by Eugene O'Neill.
Exactly.
He's sitting there, well, I just can't, you know, I've been here inside this mountain for all my life.
Very perplexing.
You know, Lady won't steam, and I'm just so depressed. And you're saying, you know, liven up, you know, this is for kids under 5.
Yeah, now you fully understand how badly it turned out than what you could imagine.
As of July of 2020, the film currently have, based on the film's reception from critics, is a 19% on Metacritic, a 4.1 out of 10 on IMDb, and a 21% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, with the critics' consensus on the latter saying, and I quote, "Kids these days demand cutting-edge special effects, or at least a clever plot with cute characters. This movie has neither, having lost its Americanization, what the British original did so right." Now, as for the box office, again, it's not exactly what you would imagine. The film had an opening weekend of nearly $4.52 million, which led it to have a domestic gross of $15.9 million, while in other countries, and especially the United Kingdom, only grossing $3.8 million, leading to a worldwide total of over $19.7 million, up against the film's budget of $19 million.
So by the sounds of it, it actually broke even with its budget, right? Well, when you really think about it for a second and actually take a look back on how much it earned when it first came out, it did become a box office flop when it was first released.
Because of the poor reception of the film, it resulted in Britt Ahcroft stepping down from her own company, which is now renamed into Galang Entertainment, and ultimately left the show entirely. Not only that, but there's one other thing that I should bring up that nobody ever mentioned. On July 1st, 2000, Destination Films announced plans for development on a sequel to the film. Again, because the film did so bad upon its release, it resulted in all plans for the sequel to be immediately scrapped. Once again, no pun intended.
But hey, because of the terrible stuff that happened with the movie, there is actually a bright side to it, as it actually did gain a cult following sometime later.
And I mean that too, mainly in the merchandising side of things. These include the film on VHS and DVD, numerous of books and toys, the movie soundtrack, a CD-ROM print studio game. Hell, there were even toys given to people at Subway at that time. Hell, I still have them in my hands for quite a long time. Not only that, but the film was nominated 2 times at both the Young Star Awards in 2000 and the Young Artist Awards in 2001, mainly for Mara Wilson's performances. Other than that, nothing much else.
So by the sounds of it, you think that would be it for the entire story of the movie. Oh, but wait! There's more! And believe it or not, this only happened several years after the movie's release, leading to where we are now.
In 2007, Britt Ahcroft commented on the scenes, plot elements, and even characters that were cut from the film. Plus, it not only has all the changes and cuts that I mentioned earlier, but there's a whole lot more changes and cuts that didn't make it into the final cut. Many of which were shown in early drafts of the script that not only the majority of people got their hands on, but were also leaked onto the internet. For starters, the film was originally going to be narrated by an adult Lily who would have told it to her children 20 years later in the movie, but is instead replaced by Baldwin as Mr. Conductor, who also narrates the film. Thomas's anthem and the Island song, as well as Night Train, were originally going to be used in the film, but were dropped, leaving only Really Useful Engine as the only Thomas song to be used in the movie. Both Cranky the Crane and George the Steamroller were originally going to be in the film, but again, were dropped. Speaking of the former that I mentioned, the scene, based on these storyboards, was originally going to have Cranky drop barrels of oil all over Diesel 10, but was altered to have him covered in coal in the coal logger, as you can see here in the final cut of the film.
Now it's time for the next lesson, huh? I call it How to Stop Being Stupid. I know that's gonna ruin my facial.
Not only that, Edward was originally going to be in the film in early drafts of the script, but was cut out in later drafts as well as the final cut because there was not enough time to utilize his character. But out of all the interesting finds of the film that were cut out from the film entirely was the chase scene in the climax, which, believe it or not, has Doug Lennox as P.T. Boomer. When it was first uploaded to YouTube, it was just mainly the clip dubbed over with loud music, making it hard to hear, dialogue-wise. But after Lennox's passing in November of 2015, the clip was uploaded again, except this time with all voices intact. Meaning that we can not only hear Lennox as Boomer, but also Bellis as Thomas and Scott as Diesel 10. Again, that's just to name a few. Because of all the stuff that got cut out from the final cut of the film, film, it prompted many Thomas fans to come together and organize numerous of petitions to get a director's cut of the movie officially released, meaning it could redeem Ahcroft's reputation as well as see what she had in mind. The most notable one out of all of them is a non-profit organization known as Restore the Magic, where their goal is to get numerous of petitions to get the director's cut of the movie released, which is still up to Destination Films, which is owned by Sony at the time. But still, the organization has also done other projects in addition to that. The most recognizable one they've done was to officially get the lady prop used in the movie officially restored, to which was not only successful through their crowdfunding campaign, and the prop is currently in storage waiting for the word on the future for its restoration. Not only that, the same people behind the company, who run a YouTube channel known as Rainbow Sun Productions, hosted a special video presentation to celebrate its 20th anniversary with some big names behind film, television, and the stage, where it presented a virtual script reading as a reimagined extended version, combining the script drafts from May of 1999, the filming draft on August of 1999, and the finished film altogether, which ran from July 19th, 2020, all the way until July 31st of that same year.
Not only all of those that I mentioned, but plenty of other stuff that happened during that time.
For one thing, the film was aired on Sky Movies in the UK in 2002 and on the BBC 2 years later, as well as on PBS Kids Sprout in the US in 2015. Not only that, but from 2005 all the way until 2018, there were numerous other attempts at Thomas the Tank Engine being made into a movie, but were not given theatrical releases and were only given straight to DVD instead. With some of them good, some decent, but most of them are terrible. And also, a second attempt at bringing Thomas to the big screen was brought into play, which would have been directed by Nine director Shane Acker, and was originally going to be called The Adventures of Thomas, with the film's visuals done by Weta Digital, but sadly, never saw the light of day. In early 2020, Shout Factory announced that they were gonna release the movie onto Blu-ray for its 20th anniversary on June 9th, 2020, but was later pushed back until September the 29th of the same year.
Seems like everything is going great right about now. That is until May of 2020, where everything starts to go downhill once again.
Around May of 2020, it was reported on social media that the original work print of the film, containing all the stuff that got cut out, got leaked onto the internet and even on YouTube. With the infamous one out of all of them was done by a channel known as TATMRDC Leaker. The backlash on it was massive, calling it out for being completely unfinished. It was so bad that even Ahcroft herself was not impressed by the leaks. Because of this, all the leaks of the original work print got taken down off the internet, leaving us wondering and still hoping when the director's cut of the film to get officially released.
Now that of course brings us to where we are now, where the movie is still in its current state and actually does make us wonder, could it be much better than what we hoped for? But let's just stop and think for a moment, because when you really think about it, that's actually a pretty good point right here.
In order to answer that in my point of view, I might as well answer that by sharing you all my Magic Railroad experience. I was about 4 years old when I first saw it in theaters. It was even the very first movie I saw in theaters in general, which led to me wanting to become a filmmaker in the first place. I remember as a kid, I enjoyed it a whole lot after I saw it, and actually watched it numerous times on my old VHS copy of it. But as I got older, my excitement for it has died down a little, and I just think it's a decent flick. I still remain a fan of Thomas to this day despite all of that, but I knew the movie could have been much better if it does contain some stuff like what the show did. But when I saw all the stuff that got cut out and even read a bit of the original drafts of the script, it does make me think, yeah, maybe the film could have been much better if they would have kept the stuff that were cut out.
Now don't get me wrong, I think a movie based on Thomas the Tank Engine can work as long as they get the right people to handle it, as well as a great story that can actually stay true to both the books and the TV show. But with all the stuff that got cut out, maybe Magic Railroad would have been a much better movie if they would have kept in all the stuff that Ahcroft had in mind.
So to this day, I still think the movie is a decent one in my opinion, and not really one of my favorites by far, but I will fully admit at the same time, it's also pretty much harmless and worth the watch for the most part. But do I think the film would be much better if they kept all the stuff that were cut out? Absolutely. With everything that we've discovered on the film by far, we could have gotten a fun, thrilling, and interesting adventure that would have been not only on the same level as the books and the show, but also live up to what Ahcroft had in mind. Maybe at some point we'll not only get an official release of the director's cut of the film, but also a proper Thomas the Tank Engine movie that would have been fun and interesting and stay true to the original source material. But until that happens, we'll just have to keep on waiting a little while longer. What else can you say except...
Sparkle, sparkle, sparkle.
Yep, that speaks for itself. So anyways, thank you guys so much for watching this special video. And of course, as always, let me know in the comment section below on what your experience of Thomas and the Magic Railroad is like for you, as well as leaving me constructive criticism and or advice on how I can improve my videos in the near future. And of course, as always, feel free to send me an email to this email address, backley95@hotmail.com. If you have any questions for me in particular, follow me on my social media sites like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and plenty other social media sites that I have provided. All the links to them, as well as my inspirations and my sources, are down in the description box below. And finally, don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel, as well as turning on the notification bell and select all notifications to help keep up to date with me with what I put up. So yeah, that's literally about it. Thank you guys so much for watching this one, and yeah, it was of course a really big one that I've worked on, but hey, I'm sure it's actually worth it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you in the next video. Take care.